happened in Ukraine with Russia invading Ukraine. And this show of support, which we have seen before with other American officials, though, Nancy Pelosi is sort of the highest ranking elected official to visit Taiwan in a very long time. A show of support, I'm sure, is appreciated. But is that all that Taiwan wants or needs? And I'm not sure if Adam can hear me, because I don't think we can hear Adam. Okay, so Adam's got a bad connection. So then I'll flip that over to Nancy then. A show of support is good, but would Taiwan like to see more than just a show of support?
Sure. And obviously there is a risk associated with this trip. When you poke the bear, you don't know how the bear is going to react. Certainly, China has already reportedly stepped up military exercises and has been dispatching warplanes just today along what's known as the median line in the Taiwan Strait, which is viewed as a provocative move. Reuters has reported that the U.S. has had to move warships into the region as well. And so, this is the kind of situation that U.S. officials indicated on background they were worried about, because any time that you have China reacting to a situation militarily, that increases the chances for a miscommunication, a misfire, something that could quickly spiral out of control. And that's why this moment is so incredibly sensitive in that part of the world. And at a time when U.S.-China relationships are already so fraught, it is really unclear what this visit is going to do to the ability of the United States to continue to communicate with China in the months ahead.
So it's very interesting that the Speaker would choose this particular moment, Nancy, to go to Taiwan. Have we lost the pictures, I guess?
I don't know, but I agree with you about sort of the moment. There we go.
There we go. Yeah. All right. So it's interesting to me, Nancy, that she would choose this particular moment to go to Taiwan. I wonder if, even though the White House has sort of distanced itself at some level from this, that there is a message here to China, which is that the United States will not be threatened, will not be cowed by what has been an ally of the United States. I mean, the United States has been in Taiwan's corner since essentially the nationalists first declared its independence from mainland China.
Right, and recall that it was just a couple of months ago when the president was in Tokyo that I asked him if he would be willing to defend Taiwan militarily if China were to invade. And to our great surprise, at that press conference, the president said, yes, absolutely, it's our duty to defend Taiwan. The reason that came as such a surprise was because the U.S. has been committed to this concept of strategic ambiguity for decades, where we don't really say whether or not we would defend Taiwan, because there is this larger ambiguity about China's claim to Taiwan and the fact that China refuses to interact diplomatically with countries that recognize Taiwan as a sovereign nation. And so Taiwan has been in this limbo for decades. The U.S. has had this very ambiguous policy for decades, but the president kind of smashed through that ambiguity and said, no, I'd be glad to defend Taiwan if China were to invade. So clearly, in some ways, the Speaker and the President are on the same page in terms of their dedication to Taiwan. The Speaker is a known hawk when it comes to China, dating back decades, speaking out against the massacre in Tiananmen Square, which is a reason that the Chinese are particularly incensed that she is the one making this trip. You know, there are U.S. officials and members of Congress who visit Taiwan all the time. There have been several congressional delegations just this year. Lindsey Graham visited, Bob Menendez, senator from New Jersey, visited, Tammy Duckworth, the senator from Illinois, has visited. Those visits have not generated anywhere near the kind of anger that we're seeing from China right now as this visit from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is.
And so, Nancy, let me ask you, this has been a long time coming. Recall, and it's interesting to see Chinese reaction now to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, which you can see now on your screen, arriving in Taipei just moments ago. Nancy, remember almost 6 years ago when newly inaugurated President Donald Trump took a phone call from Taiwan's president, and then the White House put out a press release about the newly inaugurated president taking that phone call, which, let's remember, upended decades. I mean, as you pointed out, Nancy, members of Congress have visited Taiwan for as long as we can remember. But the last time a president took a phone call on the eve of his inauguration from a Taiwanese leader had been many, many, many years before that. And yet it seems as if we're seeing more consternation from the Chinese over this than I know they put out diplomatic protests back in right after President Trump came into office. But you remember that, right? And everybody was like, oh, no, what does this mean for China-Taiwan relationships? And what does this mean for the United States relationship with China? Mm-hmm. Well, nothing, because here we are 6 years later, and now somebody who's not the president of the United States is making a visit.
Right, and President Biden just spoke with President Xi on the phone this past week for a couple of hours. So, it is possible that the two sides can talk on one hand but agree to disagree on the other. The economic relationship is simply too important to forgo all communication altogether. But make no mistake, this is a trip that probably could not have taken place while President Trump was in office, because it required such careful coordination with the administration. In order to pull this off, Speaker Pelosi's office would have had to coordinate so closely with the White House, with the U.S. military. First of all, she's on a U.S. military jet. Second of all, other military jets in the region were scrambled to protect her. There are reportedly U.S. warships that had to be moved to get closer to Taiwan, to send a message to China. And so all of this very complicated coordination does not happen at the drop of a hat. It happens as a result of weeks, if not months, of very careful planning. And it's very difficult to see a Democratic Speaker of the House being able to pull that off with a Republican president sitting in the Oval Office.
We have a statement from Nancy Pelosi's office, and it says what one would expect. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but, it begins, our congressional delegation's visit to Taiwan honors America's unwavering commitment to supporting Taiwan's vibrant democracy. Our visit is part of a broader trip to the Indo-Pacific, including Singapore, Malaysia, South Korea, and Japan, focused on mutual security, economic partnership, and democratic governance. So I think we have correspondent Adam Yamaguchi back again. You are in Taiwan. You've been there for a little bit. And, Vlad sort of pointed out that even when former President Trump did something that was sort of unthinkable, which was receive a phone call from the president of Taiwan, it seemed like there was much more sort of anxiety over this trip than there was over that phone call. But it's 2 years later, and Xi Jinping is in a different position. We've dealt with a pandemic, just like many countries across the globe. There are economic concerns. People are demanding that he do more to support them. So perhaps he's a little more sensitive about his kind of, I don't want to say hold on power, but the image that he's projecting to his own people. Mm-hmm. But Adam, the reaction in Taiwan is different. They've heard these threats from China for many, many years. It doesn't seem like there is as much concern for Taiwanese officials.
Yeah, it's a strange kind of a reaction. We were all kind of surprised. As you mentioned earlier, we've been here for a bit now, working on a documentary, and then we just sort of stumbled into this moment here. And as we talk to ordinary Taiwanese, there's a lot of this sort of shrugging of the shoulders. This doesn't seem like that big a deal. It seems like the media seems much more interested in this than ordinary folks do. And I think, as you allude to, part of the psyche of Taiwanese is, as you said, we've lived with these threats for so long. We've heard all of this before, and nothing has happened. And so this is just another tirade from whether it's Xi Jinping or some other member of the government in China, trying to threaten us, and we're not going to be, we're not afraid.
So we just want to point out to our audience that Adam is in Taiwan, which is why the audio isn't ideal. But Adam, you mentioned in the piece that I saw last night for the CBS Evening News that you did have the opportunity to witness Taiwan's preparedness in anticipation of a potential, and we're not talking about upcoming, but I mean, they do take precautions there just in case China would decide to invade, and you were there watching those maneuvers, those training exercises taking place. What'd you see?
Yeah, so we saw a couple different exercises. The first was a simulation of an attack on Taipei Port and the mouth of the Tamsui River. And the thinking here seems to be, and by the way, all of these war games all of these exercises are based on war games that were performed just a couple months back. And these war games, these tabletop war games, were predicated on certain intelligence and assumptions that the Taiwanese military and the government have made about what China might do in the event of an attack or an invasion. And so the port of Taipei becomes a critical place for, let's say a would-be invader, in this case China, would want to take control of. And then essentially, once they've assumed control of the port, move further upriver and then be in a position to really decapitate the leadership in Taipei. So there is a certain sobriety about all of this, and I know this probably sounds a little contradictory to what I was saying earlier, but there is this strange duality. There is the shrugging of the shoulders, but there is also this preparedness that comes from decades and decades of potential threats.
Yeah, I've always sort of gotten the sense that Taiwanese officials, particularly now, are approaching this sort of with an awareness that they are friends and there are countries like America showing support. But a lot of their own defense is probably going to fall on their shoulders should something happen. It's not like Ukraine, where you have friendly countries bordering Ukraine and you can, send $8 billion worth of military aid to, I don't know, Poland. And, Taiwan's an island. And so it would be sort of a much different country to defend, like the president says that he would, militarily, than, Ukraine would be.
Absolutely. I mean, there are lots of comparisons. And Henry, I'm sorry, I'm standing right in front of the hotel where Speaker Pelosi's vehicles are expected to come through, and I'm just seeing a lot of movement of security. So I'm sorry, stand by as I try to decipher what's going on here.
No, Adam, if you got to go do your thing. We'll continue this conversation. Okay, we can continue this conversation because I know that you're right in the thick of things, and I don't want you to miss anything.
Yeah, well, my cameras are on, so we'll catch it together.
We still have Nancy Cordes with us?
Running commentary I can.
All right, because I don't want to just freeze Nancy out.
And we do have Isaac Stonefish as well.
All right.
Standing by.
So, Isaac, we'll come to you in just a minute. But, Nancy, one of the things I want to point out is there have been a series of tweets from one of the spokespersons for the Minister of Foreign Affairs in China who's been tweeting. And she's been tweeting over the course of the last couple of minutes. And one of the things that she tweets is this: the U.S. should give up any attempt to play the Taiwan card. Okay, this is a different one than the one I'm reading, and strictly abide by the one China principle and the 3 joint communiques, both in words and in deeds, to the letter. China firmly opposes separatist moves toward Taiwan independence and interference by external forces, and never allow any room for Taiwan independent forces in whatever form. So again, this is Twitter, obviously, but there are some very strong messages that are being sent here by China's foreign ministry.
Right, and I think no one anticipated that China would just roll over and let this visit happen. There's a certain amount of face saving that has to take place, and so there's a lot of tough talk. Whether the Chinese resort to more than tough talk, more than some military exercises in the Taiwan Strait, remains to be seen. And it also depends on what Speaker Pelosi does. It's nighttime now, as you've pointed out. She's going to spend the night in Taiwan, which is also symbolic. This isn't some 2-3 hour visit on her way to Japan and South Korea. She's spending a full day and night in Taiwan. Does she hold a press conference? Does she, what kinds of symbolic appearances does she make? All of that will help to dictate how the Chinese respond. But the reality of the timing here is that it comes at a point when China has clearly already flexed its muscle in Hong Kong. It has laid claim to several islands in the South China Sea that are unpopulated, disputed islands. And so clearly it's an indication of a military buildup in China, a more muscular military policy in China, more acquisitional, and that is why there's so much concern that Taiwan might be next. And from talking to various administration officials, they do fear that perhaps not this year, but in the next few years, that China might make an attempt to more overtly take over Taiwan. And that's why missions like this one that we're watching play out right now are so critical.
We want to bring in Isaac Stonefish. He is the founder and CEO of research firm Strategy Risks. So, Isaac, Vlad sort of pointed out that when President Trump received a phone call from the president of Taiwan, it didn't seem to make that big of a splash. But 2 years later, I want to talk about why this seems to be so much more sensitive of a visit. Xi Jinping is in an interesting place right now. He wants to extend his legacy. He is facing somewhat of criticism and backlash over the handling of the pandemic and the economic fallout from that in China. And of course, there's a backdrop of Ukraine, and the philosophy that Vladimir Putin used to invade Ukraine is very similar to the way China feels about Taiwan. Can we talk about, why China seems to be more of a threat now than maybe it was 2 years ago to Taiwan?
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Beijing is far more powerful now than it was both 2 years ago and also roughly 5.5 years ago when Trump spoke to the Taiwanese president. And this is a very uncertain and unstable time for China and the top of the Chinese Communist Party in the lead up to the party Congress this fall. And we really don't know if Xi wants to have a more muscular approach to Taiwan, wants to have a calmer approach to Taiwan. But because we have so little insight into top-level politics in China, we really do have to be prepared for a wide range of outcomes.
Nancy, let me ask you a question. We talked about the White House reaction to Speaker Pelosi's trip, but what's been reaction from high-ranking members of Congress, both Democrat and Republican? I did see when this first sort of leaked out that she might potentially be visiting Taiwan, that we did see Republicans applauding Speaker Pelosi, disagree with her on a lot of policy issues, but in this situation, at least a couple of days ago, they seem to be behind her.
That has been such a fascinating element of this whole controversy, Vlad. The fact that you have high-ranking Republicans and Democrats alike who have been sort of egging her on, saying, she needs to take this trip at this time. And the fact that the White House is pushing back is even more reason for her to take the trip. Now she really can't back down. And so that really scrambled some political lines here in Washington and created something of a messaging challenge for this White House. And that might be one of the reasons that you've seen a turnabout in the past, really in the past 24 hours, from the White House initially, administration officials leaking that this wasn't a good time to go, to then pivoting to, well, she's the speaker, so she makes her own decisions. We're not going to tell her what to do. To now, finally, they've landed on, this is a very important trip, and we support her 100%, and we'll do whatever we need to do to make it successful.
Well, there were some opinion pieces that suggested that when the president was asked about this trip, and he said, well, the military doesn't want her to go, that he almost sort of forced it, because then if she didn't go, it certainly would seem like she was bowing to the pressure from Beijing, you know? And as you pointed out, Nancy, you know, sometimes the president says things that are unexpected, and then the administration kind of does some cleanup massaging work afterwards. So I don't know whether it was the president that sort of pushed the administration to clarify, let's say, its position, or whether that was the position all along and maybe he said the quiet part out loud. I don't know what it was, but
he definitely said the quiet part out loud. I mean, this is what we had been hearing on background from various administration officials, that there was this concern about the timing, and then President Biden was asked about it on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews, and as he sometimes does, he you know, just went ahead and said what he had been hearing, which was, he didn't say that he was opposed to her going, but he did say that the military didn't think it was a good time for her to go, and he hasn't been asked about it since then. So we haven't gotten an update from the president, who of course has been isolated for most of the days ever since then because he has COVID. So we haven't had a chance to kind of get an updated take from the president on how he now feels about Speaker Pelosi taking this trip. But one thing that is very true that we've heard now multiple times from the White House podium is that Speaker Pelosi does make her own decisions. I mean, this is a woman who has been the Speaker of the House for quite some time, quite capable of making up her own mind. And it is true that she does not need White House approval to go ahead and take this trip, and neither do the other members of Congress who are along with her for this ride.
So Nancy and Isaac, Speaker Pelosi has just published, just in the last couple of hours, an op-ed in the Washington Post where she frames this trip as a battle between autocracy and democracy. And she writes this: indeed, we take this trip at a time when the world faces a choice between autocracy and democracy, as Russia wages its premeditated illegal war against Ukraine, killing thousands of innocents, even children. It is essential that America and our allies make clear that we never give in to autocrats. So that is a op-ed that just appeared in the Washington Post in the last 40 minutes or so. Isaac, I guess, looking forward, are we expecting to see saber rattling from China, probably going to conduct some kind of training mission in the South China Sea or in the Philippine Sea or in areas surrounding Taiwan? Perhaps the United States will also do a little bit of saber rattling on their own, move a battleship into the area or an aircraft carrier. I mean, but at the end of the day, we're not expecting to go to war with China.
We're certainly not right now. What the future holds in terms of war is far more murky. Beijing will saber rattle. They'll often, at times like this, practice asymmetric warfare. So we just saw a big hack of a Taiwanese government site, which probably links to Beijing. We saw a restriction of exports from Taiwan to the mainland. And I think we also will probably see punishment towards U.S. companies as a way to communicate to D.C. that they are very displeased. I think it'll be very unlikely that this particular action leads to a war between the United States and China over Taiwan, but we are in very unpredictable times, so it is certainly a possibility.
Nancy, Isaac, thank you so much for joining us, guys. All right, so we have a whole lot more coverage throughout the day on Speaker Pelosi's historic visit to Taiwan, so you want to stick around for that. Yeah, after the break, we're going to get you up to speed on some of the other news we're following today, including primaries in 5 states, deadly wildfires in California, and the killing of the leader of Al-Qaeda. Stay with us. You're streaming CBS News.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready?
A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white? A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Norah O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
More politics. 5 states across the country hold primaries today: Arizona, Michigan, Missouri, Kansas, and Washington.
Yeah. And many Republican candidates today, it's a test for them. It's a test of their loyalty for former President Trump. Earning his endorsement can mean a big boost in the primary. In Missouri, Eric Greitens and Eric Schmidt are two of the leading GOP candidates running for a Senate seat. Well, yesterday, former President Trump made an endorsement in that race, and he wrote, "Proud to announce that Eric has my complete and total endorsement." The only thing is, he didn't say which one he meant.